18 goals, 27 assists. This year, about the same amount of games played, a little more, but 19 goals, more goals, going to end up with more assists, more points. You'd like to see that little improvement from year one, year two, and then how high can he go? And a lot of that will determine, in the end, the success of the Sharks. What is Will Smith as a player? What's your ceiling, do you think?
Yeah, I see him as a 70 to 75 point player in the NHL, which would be perfect for the San Jose Sharks to have Macklin Celebrini, a running mate between him, Eklund, whoever else might come down the pipe with, you look on the back end and Sam Dickinson feeding them twisted wristers from the blue line on the power play. I mean, it kind of sets up nicely. I think the toughest part for the Sharks in their build is not Celebrini's running mates up front. It's going to be who else do they have on defense on the back end? Only 2 NHL defensemen under contract next season. They need more in a big way.
Couple free agents out there, and Darren Radish is available. It's someone perhaps they could look at. And Thomas Drance is our guest today, and he has some very interesting theories about what kind of contracts maybe you should offer at UFAs. Why go 7 years? Why not overpay them over 3 or 4, like a Darren Radish? If the Sharks stepped up and said, "Hey, we'll give you $9 million for 3 or 4," something like that. That is kind of an interesting philosophy. He gets his bank that he's looking for, but it's at a shorter time period, which is fine by him, because he's probably saying, I'm still going to, I plan on being in the league for year 5, 6, and 7, as if I signed a deal like that.
I think it's term that's always the killer with these contracts, not the AAV. So pump up the AAV a little bit, particularly in a time with a rising cap environment. Take advantage of the increased space and don't cap yourself at the knees for the future years where you really need the space.
Especially if there's not a lot of inventory in free agency, right? To be aggressive, to get a guy. Otherwise, you got to wait a whole other year. Who knows when another guy is going to be available? So we'll talk to Tom. Obviously, we'll talk about GM meetings, the player safety under fire a bit. We'll hit on that. The World Cup of Hockey, of course, and some other things as well. But first, some Franks and Beans before one more birthday. Bobby Ryan is 38. 4 straight 30-goal seasons from age 21 to 24. For Bobby, great start in his career. He's 38. Andrew Ference is 47. He went to 2 cup finals, 04 with Calgary and 2011 with the Bruins. He, of course, won that second one. He had a good postseason, too, for the Bruins. Very productive offensively, like a better rate than his average in his regular season career. And, of course, he got that cup in 2011. So before
Bobby
the rundown,
Ryan.
let's hit the...
I was just going to say, Bobby Ryan, the pride of Cherry Hill, New Jersey. We had an inside joke going for a long time. So congrats to happy birthday to Bobby Ryan.
Yeah, 38 years old today. All right, Franks and Beans time before we get to the rundown. Do you have your wiener, Frank?
I have a wiener. I mean, not one to ever show on TV, but yes.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah.
I need to travel with my beans, but I currently I'm not traveling with my beans. I should. All right, Penguins tied for the most goals scored in a game this season. They went into Colorado last night and spanked the Avalanche. Evgeny Malkin steps out of his 5-game suspension, right into the penalty box, first shift, and then out of the penalty box and into the net. That's classic Gino, right? I mean, end of 5-game suspension, take a penalty right away, then step out and score a goal.
Beautiful. And really interesting comments from Evgeny Malkin post-game. Him saying that he really, for the first time, has publicly at least expressed his desire to continue playing. And he, I'm sure, wants to remain a Pittsburgh Penguin. Kyle Dubas has tabled those talks until the offseason, wouldn't really get into more in terms of the back and forth. And Kyle Dubas has done his job to keep that part quiet, but he said he'd like to play for another year, quote, or 2. So I thought that was an interesting admission. A lot of people wondered whether this would be the end of Evgeny Malkin's career in general this season, and he's been pretty good.
Yeah, no reason why he should. He's better than point per game. There's no need to retire when you're better than point per game guy, and if you love it like he does. So what else is he going to do? He's still a young guy. Turns 40 in July. Really good year. He had 2 goals, 35th multi-goal period, passes Jaromir Jagr for 3rd most in Penguin history. A multi-goal period. 71 for Mario, 37 for Sid, now 35 for Gino. And Erik Karlsson, another goal, another 2 assists. He looked sensational last night, Frank. His 54th career 3-point game. That ties Nicholas Lidstrom for 10th most by a defenseman in NHL history. I know a lot of people have a real issue with his defense overall, but he's going to the Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Fame defenseman, and he's a brilliant player to watch offensively.
He is, and I'll take it a step further and say one of the big reasons, and there's a list of 5 of them, why the Pittsburgh Penguins are a playoff team this year as opposed to last year and the last couple, and Erik Karlsson's play has been part of it. And one of the big things that I've really liked has been Dan Muse decided to utilize him in different ways. Put him on the penalty kill. Get this guy engaged. Yep. I can kill penalties. You don't think of Erik Karlsson as a defensive-oriented type player, but get him involved in the game. And he's done that, and that's resulted in increased buy-in from one of the vets.
Great skater, great hands, great vision, should be a good PKer. Yeah, might not block every shot like another type of defenseman, but when you got a good hands, good feet, and a good head, you should be a good penalty killer. And he's been pretty public about this new coach giving him chances. I think the coaching change was really good for him, for sure. He might be their MVP. Like that's how much of a good year he is having. You know, now that Sid's been out with an injury and Karlsson continues to produce, you see how valuable he's been. How they push the pace. They play so quickly, no matter who is in or out of the lineup. They look the same. That's the mark probably of a good coach and a good back end, because they kind of fuel so much of your pace. And certainly Karlsson has done that. Interesting here, Nathan MacKinnon, 4th straight 110-point season. I would think the 4 straight 110-point seasons, even though 100-point seasons really weren't invented until we expanded from 6 to 12. There weren't many, because then we added more games too. There weren't a lot of 100-point seasons before that. But so 4 straight 110-point seasons. Again, the list is short, Frank, and that surprised me. It also surprised me that Connor McDavid hasn't done it. Wayne Gretzky, obviously. Mike Bossy had 4 straight 110-point seasons. Guy Lafleur, who owned the 70s. Phil Esposito, part of that expansion Bobby Orr combination that produced 100-point seasons for him and Orr. And then Marcel Dion. That's it. 5. And Nate joins him.
I thought about it last night when we were talking about Anze Kopitar passing Marcel Dion. I know that he played in a different era, but like I don't know that his accomplishments have necessarily been talked about enough. When you think of like the pantheon of all-time scorers, like no one ever talks about him.
Yeah. I mean, he played in basically Esposito's era and Lafleur and then a little bit of Wayne and Bossy. So it's like, man, that is something.
But all by himself for big chunks of that time. Like, it's not like he had like massive running mates that were carrying him or piling up points next to him.
Right. And like one of the few legends, and he would be a legend, maybe why he's not considered a legend, because he didn't win a Stanley Cup. Like most every great hockey player, they find a way to win one. You know, there were only 6 teams for a long time. It wasn't, and even in the modern era, they'll get their win. And that's what makes the McDavid thing interesting. And then Matthews now creeping towards 30. But Dion didn't get one. But just you go down the top scoring list of all time, they all got one. He's like the one notable guy who didn't. Speaking of Art Ross, it is McDavid leading this year, and he's going to have to, he's got to reset his 4 straight if he wants to get that. He's got 114. Nate's got the 110 I talked about for the 4th straight year. Cooch at 106. Goals, Nate's at 45. Like to see him get 50. I'm sure he'd love to get 50. Cole Caulfield, 39, should get 40. 40 is a cool number. Kaprizov, 38, cool number. Boldy, 38. He's going to get 40. Connor McDavid, 37. He had 26 last year, 32 the year before. Remember, he had 64 in 22-23, and then back-to-back 26-32. So it's good now he's going to be back to a 40-goal pace. He should be a 40-goal guy with his talent. And maybe I just wondered, like the year he scored 64, obviously they don't even get to the Cup final. They come close, but I just wonder if Connor every year he's trying to figure out what's the best thing I can do to help us win. Like I wonder, and so maybe I need to pass more, make more people better, and that's why his goal scoring went down the last 2 years, 26 and 32. Now he's back up to 37. So maybe he's trying to find that sweet spot, right, to win. I think he never stops thinking about what can I do to help this team win? Like what's my best formula to help us win?
Well, he's always thinking about that, but here's some other food for thought on McDavid's 37 goals. He had 3 in the first 14 games this year. So that means he's got 34 over the last, 50-ish? 34 and 50 is pretty good.
Right. And that's why he is on a little bit. The MVP is going to be a fascinating vote at the end of the year because he's been cooking to the finish. And looks like they're starting to get their rhythm as well. So he could really get going here, although Leon is out. All right, a couple more beans before we hit the rundown. Mammoth needed a win, and they got one against Dallas. They snapped a 4-game winless streak. Stars' first regulation loss since January the 22nd. It's been a while. He can't win them all. And again, Jason Robertson, this speaks to his level of play as a player. First player in Dallas Star, Minnesota North Star history with 4 straight 80-point seasons. Like that's 4 straight 80-point seasons is not easy. First one ever in the history of the franchise to do it. Pastrnak, 2 goals.
I was going to say, had Mike Modano not played in the dead puck era, he would have done it as well. That was a totally different scoring environment. And by the way, Jim Nill mentioning yesterday publicly for the first time that they have tabled talks with Jason Robertson's group until after the season. So don't expect a contract extension now.
That's good to know. David Pastrnak, 2 goals up to 26. The Bruins need him to score goals. They still lost in overtime. 77th career multi-goal game. That passes Neely and second most to Phil Esposito. I said it before on the show. I think if Pasta just stays a Bruin, doesn't get dealt here, lives out his contract, maybe signs one more, that he'll pass Johnny Busick and be number 1 all-time Bruin, David Pastrnak, as he's turning out to be. And I'm kind of curious about the captaincy in Boston. Both him and Charlie want it. Like, to be a captain for an original 6 team is very special, especially an organization like the Bruins. It's interesting, Frank. I think they both would love it, and only one can get it if they choose to. And I think they'll give a C in the offseason, don't you think?
I would think so.
Yeah. It's just kind of an interesting little thing. I'm sure they both want it. And if Pasta's their best player, and if he wants it, you think that he would get it. We'll see. But McAvoy's kind of built for it too. Do anything to win. Obviously, look at his face. Patrick Kane, career goals 503 and 504. The first one broke a tie with Joey Mullen, so now he's 4th most goals. He's got the most points, U.S. born. But U.S. born, he's 4th behind Modano, 561, Kachuk, 538, Roenick, 513. So a couple for Patrick Kane. Detroit, a big 2 points. Did they need that last night? We'll see if it's enough. They beat
Detroit's
Calgary.
Win and Boston's 3-point game highlights just how difficult it's going to be for Columbus. Like, you're right back in the same spot. Now Columbus has to win both games that they have in hand over Detroit because Detroit holds the tiebreaker. It's not easy when you see teams reeling off 3-point games.
Yeah, I think Columbus is looking at Boston like these next 10. We've proven ourselves these 10-game increments that we're a little better than them. And they have road games coming up. They lose to the Devils. Or they're lose in overtime. They get a point. But I wonder if they're looking at them as that's a team that we can catch. And
it would be Detroit that would be the target for me with the injuries that they have and how poor they've been in March. That'd be the team I'd be chasing.
Yep. Artemi Panarin, first game back in New York since they traded him. Of course, he had an assist. He's got 10 assists in 11 games with the Kings. He's really producing, making others better.
And they had an event for fans on the ice at the Garden after the game. Panarin came back in his equipment to take photos with Ranger fans. He doesn't even play there anymore.
It's really cool. Yeah, it's a good piece of video on social with that. And Quentin Byfield, a couple of assists. He had a 5-game point in the streak. They need him. If the Kings are going to get that last spot, Kings, Sharks, Seattle, looks like it's those 3 for 1 spot. Quentin Byfield needs to go on a heater here and start producing offensively. All right, let's get to the rundown. Player safety under fire. Of course, the Gudas suspension's gotten a lot of attention, Frank, because of the player, the agent's quote. Connor McDavid then had his own little weekend soundbite as well. So George Parros facing the media, dealing with this issue. Your take, your thoughts.
He addressed the media on Tuesday morning early before day 2 of the NHL general managers meetings in South Florida, and no shock, stood by his decision on the Gudas suspension. But I thought this part of his media availability, which lasted just over 10 minutes, this part, look, everyone's got a complaint, everyone's got criticism, but so few people are short on ideas on how to fix it, how to make it better, and he's open to that, so take a listen.
If something needs to change in this game, we're going to do it. There's no ego about that. There's no rigidity. There's no trends right now or anything systematic in the game or systemic in the game that leads me to believe that we need to change something, that's happening on the ice and that we see on the ice that we're not dealing with. If that time comes, then we'll absolutely deal with that head on and involve the parties that need to be involved.
I just thought this was such a well put quote because it really turns the temperature down when you take a step back and you say, okay, well, the debate with Gudas, 5 games, if it was 8, how much less belly aching would there be? There'd be a lot less. But in the end, does that really make a difference? We don't have an epidemic of knee-on-knee hits. There have been like 14 total suspensions in 20 years. We get 1 a year. Okay, that's life. For a while, it was blindside hits. They fixed that. Then it was hits to the head, Rule 48. There was the march to all these different suspensions as the game is trying to get on track with the changes that are being made by player safety. I look now and I think he's exactly right. What do you look at in the game that you say, man, this is really ugly and needs to be policed better than it currently is? I don't see it. Maybe I'm crazy.
No, I agree. I've often, and plus it's the awkwardness of being player on player. What if they gave Gudas 12 games? Would we had anger on the other side? When McDavid said over the weekend, there seems to be an issue every time they hand out a suspension. I don't really feel that. Maybe it's a game or two either way. It's not normally a gigantic, but like you said, if there's an issue, blindside hits to the head, whatever, then you deal with that as a, that's a rule change. That's not even George's area. He's just handing down what's given him. And I guess he can perhaps create discussion in other areas by saying this is our focus, and maybe a fluid situation where you talk to the Gary Bettman or you talk to some people, should we start focusing on this? But that almost seems like an off-season issue that you really want to come down on it, and you talk to the players in training camp and listen, we're not going to deal with this issue of knee on knee, and we'll show you ways where you can avoid it, different techniques maybe you can do to minimize possibly getting that straight knee on knee and tearing somebody's ACL. Luckily for Matthews, it was an ACL, it was more of an MCL and a quad contusion. There's no reason for him to play again this year with their situation. But yeah, I'm with you. I think this is something that the players have to kind of deal with amongst themselves a little bit and then voice their concern. We want to get this out of the game. That old hockey cliche.
Right. And I know Connor McDavid asked about the process itself. What part about the process itself is broken? I mean, it relies on history, precedent. George Parros relied again on, hey, we look at the consequence or the action, not necessarily the player. I think all those things matter. And again, people want to hammer Radko Gudas as this predator. 7 calendar years, more than 7 calendar years without a suspension. Most guys don't even hang in the league that long, let alone play 7 years clean after being suspended so many times.
Right. So, I think George Parros did a good job there. Like you said, lowering the temperature. That's the first thing you want to do. And then we'll see. And, but again, I think the players need to come out and talk to, their representatives and say, this is what we want to get out. You make that suggestion. You talk to the league, you talk to GMs and whether you want to write that in a rule book or just emphasize it more. Like you said, you can emphasize it more to take things out of the game.
Right.
And like you said, this is not an epidemic. World Cup of Hockey. We made the announcement during the show yesterday as the league put out their tweet and put out their press release about the World Cup, some of the details involved with it, with that World Cup, as you kind of canvassed after the show, Frank, and then overnight, slept on it, saw some more information. Overall, what's your latest take?
Okay, so I have one gripe. And look, I love Edmonton and Calgary, and I'm excited to see this sparkling new arena in Calgary. And when you look at the 3 places that are hosting these games, they didn't go wrong at any point. So not critical of that. Prague, the way that this is set up, 6 round robin games there, plus an elimination game. Same thing in Calgary. And then the semifinals and championship game go in Edmonton, which after 3 Stanley Cup finals there, including the pandemic bubble and World Juniors, we know oil country shows up and shows out. That said, I think it's a mistake to not have best on best hockey contested in the United States, which last time I checked is home of the reigning Olympic and world champions at both the men's and women's level and the Paralympic level. You've had this amazing momentum in this country. Hockey's at the forefront for the first time in a long time. People that are casuals, non-hockey fans, are talking about USA Hockey and their triumph in Milan. Now, for the second consecutive World Cup, you don't have any games played in the United States. I just think that's a miss. We don't, no offense to Canada, we don't need to grow the game anymore in Canada. We know that Canada, like hockey is Canada's game, and they care about it, and they show up and they spend lots of money on tickets and all those things. It's great. But I still think that there had to be, and I'm not privy to the bid process. I don't know exactly what the financials were. I'm sure the province of Alberta helped and stepped up in a big way to make sure that this happened. But you mean to tell me that a joint bid between Tampa and South Florida wouldn't have been a great fit? Or why couldn't we host games in Vegas or put them in New York City at Madison Square Garden? Pick a place. You've got 3 arenas in New York alone. I think it's a miss to have this stretch of run of USA Hockey prominence and not have games played in this country. Now you could say, well, hey, Frank, the 2034 Olympics are in Salt Lake City. You know, why we're going to have best on best then? Well, there's going to be a pull then, obviously, in 2032 after missing out for so long to then also have the World Cup in the US. It should have been now. It should have been on the heels of this great success in Milan, and they had the ability to do that with the timing of this announcement. And look, I can't see the bids. I don't know exactly what happened, but 18 different North American markets. There had to be a couple winners for the U.S.
Yeah, I got to admit that didn't really cross my mind after the announcement. I wasn't really a thing for me before, during, or after, and it still doesn't really cause any blood to boil at all. Outside of the 20,000 people at the game, the rest are watching on TV anyway. I kind of look at this cooperation between the Players Association and the league as it's a business decision. It's a joint venture, and they are going to make so much money in Calgary and Edmonton. I don't think people realize, Frank, the playoff gates the Oilers get per game, because what they can charge and how big that
You're not
barn
wrong,
is.
but then let's just call it what it is. That's a cash grab. That's not, hey, we're trying to do this in the best interest.
We all know that's what it is.
Yeah, okay, well then let's call it that. It's not the World Cup of hockey. It's the World Cup of cash. Like that's what it is.
I guess that's why that's on my mind. Just the same reason why I think Russian players should play, because they're in the union, and this is a union joint venture with the league. If you don't ban them playing in the NHL, why would you ban them from playing in the NHLPA tournament? That was like, I don't understand that. So this is, I mean, what they're going to get with Calgary, with the new arena, the people in Alberta who will spend lots of money. Maybe Connor McDavid wins a championship in Edmonton, like you said, if they win the World Cup of hockey. So for him to win that, it's not the Stanley Cup, but it's really cool, and it would be really cool for him and for those fans. And they're going to pay. I mean, I think this thing's going to make so much money because in Calgary and Edmonton, I think that's part of it. But it's also going to be exciting. Like you said, the fans. It's great for Canada.
I have no issue with Calgary and Edmonton,
and they'll still get great ratings in America.
I have no issue. I think they're going to be fantastic hosts. I'm just saying, I think we should broaden the scope here. It shouldn't necessarily just be about the gate and the revenue and the cash. It should be about getting more eyeballs on it in the US. And when it's not in this country, people definitely, it's fact, have less awareness. You could say Four Nations Face-Off wasn't properly marketed because people didn't really know about it until halfway through the game when social media went abuzz on Saturday night at the Bell Center. That's the first time some people actually clued in, casuals, to an important game being played.
But still had record-breaking ratings in the U.S. and on ESPN, and so it still, in the end, was successful, even with that late join in. But you're right, whether it's 2032, but New York City, obviously it's very expensive to hold events there, but Chicago, Minnesota has 2 American markets kind of close to one another. That's a couplet you could maybe do, but there's a lot you could probably do there. But again, Calgary probably helps in their business community with the new arena. They might have some sweeteners for suites and season tickets.
Totally
you get first access if you commit 10 years. So I think Gary Bettman's doing a little sauce pass to Calgary with this expensive new arena.
And it's beautiful. I can't wait to be there, and I will be there.
Beautiful.
I'm excited.
It's
and
beautiful.
You know how much I love Alberta in general, but I just think getting the U.S. and capitalizing on the success of international hockey, it's the first time this has ever happened in this country's history to have a clean sweep. Host it here. You can go back to Canada for 2032. It'll still be waiting. It should be about the game, not so much the interim short-term cash. That's all.
Gotcha. GM meetings in Florida. We thought about this. A tweak. If we had the floor for a couple of minutes, what might we do? The game's in a great spot. Obviously, the inventory of young players, as we've talked about, is phenomenal. But it's always fun while you're on a heater. Why not try a couple things? I like trying things. You can always change it back. How about you, Frank?
Okay. So small tweak, and believe me, like, I'm nitpicking when I say this, but I don't want power plays to end, meaning I believe when you get a power play with 50 seconds remaining in the second period, and then the teams retreat to their dressing rooms for intermission and come back out and start the third period with a face-off in the neutral zone, that you've effectively just killed off another 20 seconds of that power play. So two options. If there's a penalty late in a period, teams should be able to elect to either finish the entirety, maybe they're on a momentum buzz, finish the entirety of that 2-minute penalty on the dirty ice, and that clock just gets deleted from the third period, for instance. You'd start the period with 18 minutes and 50 seconds on the clock, for instance. Or you could elect to have the entirety of that 2 minutes played on a clean sheet, and the period starts, or the clean sheet starts, with a face-off in the offensive zone. When a team's on the power play, why do we start a period with a face-off at center ice? Because it's tradition? What sense does that make? They're on a power play. Start it in the offensive zone. Let's get more goals. Let's not give them the opportunity to have to fish the puck out of their own end for whatever reason, just because we started a new period. I want more goals. I want more power play magic. I want power plays that don't end just because there's an intermission.
I'm good with that. I mean, like I said, I know the time of the goal might be kind of weird. How would you do that going forward? But that's small stuff. You don't worry about things like that. But I really like the offensive zone faceoff to begin the next period. You're not saved by the bell. Basically, teams are saved by the bell. And then, like you said, you start with the neutral zone faceoff tradition, whatever. But I think it'd be kind of cool. Go right down to the offensive zone end for the team with the power play and start it right there. I think that's really cool. I think that would be a cool little look and just something a little curveball there. I'm okay with that. And for me, again, like you said, small tweak. I would just add 2 minutes to 3-on-3. I don't think it's a lot more load on the players throughout the course of a season. Great one last night in New Jersey with Boston and the Devils. McAvoy hits the post. Cotter comes down and scores. 3-on-3 is exciting. Jack Hughes' goal was exciting. The women's gold medal goal was exciting. 3-on-3 goals are usually highlight type exciting goals. Just throw 2 more minutes. Let's see how many, and look at the data and see if we have fewer shootouts and more exciting goals like that. Exclamation points. What a way for the hometown fans to leave the arena after a goal like that from Paul Cotter. That's going to bring them back. Like you said, anything to bring them back. And so it's just 2 more minutes. Give me 2.
Chaos last night.
Great. We love chaos. Leon Draisaitl out, but Edmonton playing a little better. Decent trend here. The goalie decision obviously is going to come down for them, the goalie play in the end. And it sounds like for now we're going to go with Connor Ingram as the guy. He's been on multiple teams in this league, but you never know when a guy comes out of nowhere. Cinderella story between that. We've had many instances in the history of the league. Can he save their season, Frank?
I think he can. First off, this is a guy who in Utah played some really meaningful minutes and going back to Arizona, and was really one of the stories of the league for his ability to come back and bounce back. And when they made that small acquisition in October and plucked him out of Utah, where there wasn't really a spot for him, and Utah actually retained cash in order to make it happen, I thought that we'd see, and said it at the time, that we'd see Connor Ingram at some point. Did I think that it'd be under these circumstances after the Oilers traded Stuart Skinner and brought in Tristan Jarry and he's performed so poorly? No, but he's their guy now, and I think he's got enough of a track record to suggest that he's capable of league average goaltending. That's really all the Oilers want, because if you look at the way that their defense has performed since the Olympic break, Bucci, we've never had an assistant coach win the Jack Adams, and I'm being facetious when I say this, but Paul Coffey and the work that he's done with this defense core, they've been markedly better in their own end. When you take a look at the expected goals against numbers that are from hockeystats.com. And so you look at the expected goals against numbers, and the Edmonton Oilers are 4th in the league, or tied for 3rd as a top 5 defensive team post-Olympic break. Their goaltending has been poor, which is why they have had to go to Ingram on essentially a full-time basis now. But some hope for the Oilers, who had a pretty decent road stretch against Vegas and against Colorado, and they had that hiccup in Dallas, but are in a fine spot moving forward to not just be a playoff team, but to be able to make some noise. Ingram will be at the part of that. Cleaning up and quieting down their own end was a huge issue that they seem to be trending in the right direction on.
Paul Coffey, hello. A couple of deals, and now Leon out. They're going to have to rely maybe on more defense. Great night in the Western Conference tonight, Frank. Preds, Jets. One team might bury the other. You got Sharks, Oilers in Edmonton. Celebrini, he went into Boston, beat Boston, went to Montreal, beat Montreal, didn't beat Ottawa, and slammed his stick against the post. He was so pissed. You got Macklin in Edmonton. You got Golden Knights home to Sabres. And you got Kraken home to Lightning. So this is a fun night from the wild card to the Pacific. Tonight's a good late night for those on the East Coast to stay up and watch some Western Conference hockey and how that playoff picture there shapes out. All right, before our guest, one more quick note. Wyatt Johnston, 22 power play goals. Frank, what a season for Wyatt. Can anybody break Tim Kerr's power play record? That's what you want to ask.
I believe the answer is no. Like, I know that we thought, hey, maybe no one will break Wayne Gretzky's goal scoring record, and Alex Ovechkin has done it, and Leon Draisaitl got close. But just a reminder that Wyatt Johnston is leading the league in power play goals so far this season, and he's way back at 22, and he's setting a new franchise record with one more, passing Dino Ciccarelli. He already owns the Dallas-only record. Tim Kerr, by the way, what a photo. What an unbelievable headshot that is. Truly tremendous hair, and what a hulking human being he was. 34 goals in any season by any measure of any strength is an incredible accomplishment. But 34 power play markers in 1 year, I don't think we're going to see someone pass that mark. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a tough one. The records are always broken at some point. There's going to be a dude, there's going to be a situation, who knows, maybe Bedard 1 year gets 35 where everything just goes right. Someone like him. Austin Matthews has one more, type of season where he comes back and just has a number like that. But yeah, that picture of Kerr, that reminds me of guest appearance on the Love Boat. That's what that looks like. He has some sort of, sitcom from the 70s, and he went on Love Boat there. Guest appearance, Tim Kerr. And he was on there and has, end up have a romantic involvement with someone on the Love Boat. That's what that picture screams to me. Love Boat.
Okay.
Hold me close, Tiny Drancer. Thomas Drance, Canucks writer on The Athletic, one of the best in the business, joins us now. What's up, Tommy?
Gentlemen, thanks for having me. I usually get private Drancer for money. That's often the one that I get, the Tina Turner. So appreciate the warm welcome. Appreciate you gentlemen having me today.
Well, I got my top 4 Thomas Drance songs with play on word with your name.
Let's go. Oh my goodness.
Thomas, I want to Drance with somebody. Whitney Houston.
Classic.
Drancing with myself, Billy Idol.
Okay. Love it. Let's get some ABBA in here.
Shut Up and Drance, Walk the Moons. I mean, that's a classic.
There's no shut up in
Lana
Drance.
Del Rey, Drance Till We Die. So I didn't go Drancing Queen, so I want to throw some off the board for you.
I appreciate that. You coming up with a top 4 list and not including Drancing Queen, that's about as unlikely as hitting a hole-in-one on a par 4, Bucci. That ever happened to you?
I have no comment. I don't like to talk about it. So let's just we'll keep that off the record. Tom, great. Thanks so much for joining us. Such an interesting time in Vancouver, such an interesting market. I think I want to get right to the lead. Was your philosophy in free agency of maybe having a different attitude towards contracts? Explain to our viewers about, the old 7-year, 8-year, get the cap as low as you can, give the players security. They're both trying to accomplish the same thing. You have a different twist on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very simple way to think about this, where in the NHL, in a hard capped league, you kind of need to go where the puck isn't, right? You sort of need to consider the system as a whole and effectively make moves designed, in my view anyway, to take advantage of what's ever rarest in the system. And for most of, the last 10 years, for most of our lexicon, most of the way we think about the NHL player contracts, is it a good contract? Is it a bad contract? Is it a good trade? Is it a bad trade? We've been obsessed with annual average value, a cap hit, right? The face value number that appears beside a player's name when you look up, Puckpedia and sort of see what your team's salary cap situation is like. And, this isn't an immutable fact. This isn't something that's necessarily true. This is something that's been true because we haven't had cap growth in the system across basically a decade. I mean, we got to the high 70s in 2017. We're in 2026 now. Obviously, there was a pandemic in there that sort of gummed up the works further, but functionally, we've had a depressingly small amount of cap growth in the NHL system across the last decade. And that's, I think, created some weird incentives, which, I really think teams are still stuck in terms of how they're evaluating their own business. And I would argue that the Nick Schmaltz deal at 8x8 is sort of an example of the sort of deals that we used to see in the flat cap era. Now to sort of get a little more specific for your audience and for your viewers, I think we're talking about here teams that would trade the value of a player's AAV and stretch out the contract, right? So you'd have 8 years or 7 years, and the length of the deal would restrain the cap hit in the contract. Why did teams do this? Because there was no cap growth in the system. It was very difficult to keep teams together. So cap space became the most valuable commodity. This was on the trade market, right? Where we saw the Carolina Hurricanes accumulate Seth Jarvis for taking on and buying out Patrick Marleau's contract, where we saw the Calgary Flames get paid a first to take Sean Monahan. There's any number of deals of this variety that you can find. JT Miller going to Vancouver. That's a deal that only happens because Tampa Bay needed to clear the decks of their cap space. So you could get first-round picks, Seth Jarvis quality prospects, if you had cap space on the trade market. You could get JT Miller caliber players on the trade market if you had cap space because contenders were so desperate for it. What you also got was teams had to make brutal, gut-wrenching decisions in terms of keeping their teams together, right? You couldn't keep all your good players, especially if you were having team success, and that created talent in free agency. It also ultimately created this really robust secondary market where really good players got bought out year after year. The Florida Panthers third pair, go check out who's playing on it. That's the best player that was bought out any given year. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Nate Schmidt, right? You also had guys like Alexander Wenberg get bought out. He was like 25. He was on a 40-point pace as a center that season. You're not finding any more 40-point 25-year-old centerman in free agency. Or Dylan Strome, who the Capitals plucked out. He was on a 50-point pace the season that he didn't get tendered a qualifying offer. That's a relic of an era that is over. Like those players are not shaking loose. So the value of cap space now is diminished severely. And there's sort of a reorientation in terms of how we think about it. If we come back to the Schmaltz example, because that's the most recent and been the one that's sort of taking up a lot of my time or thinking, because, it's a good outcome. He's a good player. They need him, right? But they're also at the very early stages of what I would consider to be a pretty promising contention window with 3 star-level forwards under the age of 25 in Peterka, Gunther, and Cooley, and a bunch of other top prospects coming, including guys like Denoye, a recent top 5 pick, Aginla, a recent top 10 pick, Danny Butt, and then obviously some defenders too, like Simashev, a recent top 10 overall pick. For me, right, the Utah Hawk Mammoth is uniquely positioned with a relatively stable and predictable source of affordable labor to sort of eat a bloated cap hit over the next 4 or 5 years, right? What I think is scarier is to have a declining asset in their late 30s on your books at just the moment when all of those types of players become more expensive, right? So 8x8 for Nick Schmaltz 5 years ago, I think that's a template win for an organization on the rise. Now, I think, man, they would have been better off if they could have, structured it and convinced him to take 14 times 4. Like, I know that's a crazy number. I know that number is going to cause your audience to recoil, but given the affordable labor that they have, given the ability in 4 years to eat half the contract, right, and sort of have a really good asset on your hands, a 34-year-old Nick Schmaltz, given the ability to go to Nick Schmaltz and be like, yeah, okay, it's $6 million, $7 million, $8 million less in total money, but you hit the open market again at 34 and the cap's going to be $135 million. Like, not only do I think it might have been better for Utah, I think it probably would have been better off for Schmaltz. And so, you know, what are the implications of this? They're significant, but I'm obviously talking a lot about the Canucks in this piece and the idea of rebuilding and the idea that, like, you know, forget looking for a couple guys, $2 million times 7 or what have you in free agency. The Canucks should go to the top of the market and offer guys massive cap hits on short-term deals that don't have the sort of trade and no move protection that we've seen proliferate. That's another product of the flat cap era, and sort of go about functioning the way teams used to in high revenue Canadian markets, and sort of using cold hard cash and the almighty dollar to effectively, you know, in my mind anyway, replicate the sorts of things that we used to see teams do by speculating on players using cap space. Cash is the new cap space. Talent is the scarce resource now. That's what my piece today was about. I know it's a little bit radical, but I think that's how teams have to start thinking about it. And I think that's where the next competitive edge lies.
Okay, so fundamentally, I agree on everything that you said, with the exception of clearly Utah is looking at this. And I talked to a general manager last week about long-term deals specifically related to this. And he said, everyone gets twisted on the number. And I'm just looking at it saying, as I ink this deal, can I at some point during the term of this deal move this player? Which history has shown that you can, and you may have to attach an asset, or you might have to buy him out, or whatever it is. Can I get out of this deal? Is there an undo button on this? And with Nick Schmaltz, I think the answer is probably yes, which leaves Utah pretty comfortable at the end of the day. But what about let's just work on your theory of 14 times 4. What about in years 3 and 4 of that deal, as you're still in ad mode and this team is still ascending, and the crippling impact that 14 has on your cap?
Well, the impact's going to be reduced provided the cap keeps going up. You can always save some of it, right? In the event that you deal the player. You can retain half. So 7 for Nick Schmaltz probably is an asset, probably is a plus value asset. I mean, that's a lower cap hit than he's going to have as it stands, right? But also, if you're only talking about a deadline move, you're talking about a couple months at 14, and you're taking salary back. I mean, for me, that's a potential leverage point. That's an expiring salary. That's space that you can use to bolster your accumulation efforts, especially if you're doing a deal with a rebuilding team. So I would view it.
I don't mean in moving Schmaltz. I mean in how much that reduces their cap space in those years that they're trying to be as competitive as possible, which is why teams try and suppress the AAV.
Right. But is that, I mean, we're talking about, so year 4 of that deal when Cooley's 25, right? You know, I mean, I do think that's about where you're going to be hitting, but there's value and flexibility even in that contending season, Frank. That's what my argument would be. You know, I don't know, for example, like, is your best window the next 4 years if you're set up the way the Utah Hockey Club is, or the Utah Mammoth, excuse me. I got to give credit to their branding. I love it. It is, you know, I think that's the big question. And what I would say is I think their window is more open than that. And that actually the flexibility of paying more, right? Even if it reduces your sort of the potency of your immediate window, is a better method to actually getting the thing done over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, than going 8 on Schmaltz. That would be my counter argument there. But of course, I see where you're going.
Okay, so I understand all of that and agree.
Yeah.
The other issue is that you hit on, which is so key for all these teams that are either in the rebuild or embarking on one, is the true scarcity of talent. We talked on the show last week about the notion that 75% of this league is exactly the same. You could take them, change jerseys, plug and play. They all give you the same impact, and they just have some slight variance in age, size, and cap hit. but it's the true difference makers, the 25%, and then even the super elite players in that group that are so incredibly hard to come by. And these guys are never making it to market. So you can be as aggressive as you want to be on the cap and structure it in that way to get the most dollars in this player's pockets as quickly as possible. But these guys don't ever become available. So good luck anyway.
So except, Frank, they do become available, and they become available at a clip of like one every 18 months. We saw Quinn Hughes move this year, right? We're not that far removed from seeing Jack Eichel move. You are very good at sort of looking ahead and projecting where the fault lines are in the league, right? I'm sure you can rattle off a name of 4 more guys on watch for you over the next 18 to 24 months. And I'm not talking about the top 25%. I'm talking about the top 25 players in the league. The what I call capital D dudes. The guys who truly sort of exert gravity on the ice every shift they're on the ice. Those guys do move. And they move for a variety of reasons, often contractual, often timing or whatever, right? I mean, there's all sorts of factors that go into shaping those outcomes. And when they move, what do they move for, right? They move for players who are very good, very young, draft picks included, right? I mean, the Quinn Hughes package is instructive. You're talking about Marco Rossi, right? A 24-year-old center, no mover, no trade protection. You're talking about another first-round pick. You're in Liam Ogren, late first-round pick. A guy in Zibuim, picked 12th overall and trended exceptionally well at college and was playing well in the NHL as a rookie, and an additional first-round pick. You go and look at Vegas, you're talking Alex Tuck, that's a star winger. You're talking Peyton Krebs, that's a really good mid-first round center prospect. Centers are a common theme here. You're talking a first-round pick. The key here is like talent scarcity exists, but it also exists in multiple forms. Right? Top talent's not going to make it to market, but that doesn't mean that the big swings aren't going to be available to those teams that accumulate talent in another variety, right? And I think young, cost-controlled, and most importantly, the flexibility to move them on, right? No trade, no move clauses, all of those things, as we saw with the New Jersey Devils earlier this year, right? Those things cannot come at the expense of a cap hit anymore. Like, we shouldn't be looking at a contract that gets signed, seeing a team-friendly cap hit, and just sort of dusting our hands and saying, good contract. The truth is that depending on the structure of that deal, it could limit severely, potentially, a team's ability to seize on those rare opportunities that do come available to acquire top talent. It might not move an unrestricted free agency, but it does move around the league. And you need to always be thinking not just about how do we land it, because for the most part, you landed at the top of the draft order, and that requires being really bad and a fair bit of pain. But also, how do we position ourselves to be the team that takes advantage on those rare occasions that it does show up, right? And that's where, like, my argument on the Schmaltz thing would be, if you position yourself on a shorter term deal, you are better positioning yourself to be a team that lands and is flexible enough to land that sort of difference-making piece down the line. Effectively, I think the trade market's critical, and those alternate pipelines of talent need to be minded just as much as the idea of like talent scarcity and keeping our own guys.
And then one more quick one before we let you go, Tom. What will the Vancouver Canucks look like this time next year? For the Canuck fans out there waiting to get your report on them.
Well, it can't be worse. So we've got a good low baseline to start at for this team to leap over. What will the Canucks look like? Yeah, I mean, it'll be fascinating to see what sorts of players they're able to escape from, contractually speaking. On defense, which you're showing right now, to a man like Zibuim, Tom Willander, and Elias Pettersson, the defender, all of them struggled, right? There's no... environmentally in Vancouver this season, it's been a slog. And all three of those defenders are enormously talented. I remain high on them, relatively speaking. But they all struggled massively this season. So did Marcus Pettersson. Although Marcus Pettersson remains like a pretty reliable defensive defender, it's really hard to see it night to night, just given what this Canucks environment looks like. So at least on defense anyway, it seems like the team is very committed to moving forward with Filip Hronek, who would obviously have the most trade value among all their assets, although he does have a full no-move clause. It'll be interesting to see whether or not the club decides to make him captain. It seems a little bit odd to me that they'd make a guy who really hasn't sort of made the effort to develop the sorts of media skills kind of required to sell a rebuild in the Vancouver market. The captain at this moment in the franchise's history, but obviously is a well-respected teammate and competitor. So I would expect him to be back. I honestly would expect Marcus Pettersson to be back at this point. This team does sort of want to have at least like a competitive floor, even though they didn't manage it this year. So I would expect this defense core to look relatively similar. Maybe you sort of go shopping for a right-handed defender, either on the trade market or in free agency. I think that's probably worth doing given Vancouver's cap space and the value that right-handed defenders seemed to net on the trade market. So maybe they sort of do that and look for a veteran player to pair with Zeke William, help him out a little bit more next season. But on defense, I think they're relatively stable. Up front, Evander Kane's going to be expiring, obviously, as is Teddy Bluger. This club has a lot of fondness for Teddy Bluger, dating back to Patrick Alvin and Jim Rutherford's shared time with him in Pittsburgh. But, if you didn't have trade value now, like, can this Canucks team, as they think through what it looks like to create asset value, can Teddy Bluger be worth a 23-man roster spot if there's no path to him having trade value as an expiring asset who's having a really good season again? If there isn't, right, if left-handed centermen who don't hit just don't have trade value, then I think you have to aim higher. I'd like to see them bring in some additional toughness into this group. They've obviously, not on this graphic, but they claimed Curtis Douglas from the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's brought just an element that I think you need during a rebuild, which is the ability to make games a little silly, make games a little nasty, especially when you're getting thumped on home ice by a superior team. I think you want to be able to show the fans that, you're not accepting that sitting down. So I think, the Beck Mallensteins of the world, the Michael McCarrons, like a center like that or a winger like that, I think adding that to this forward group would probably be helpful as they go through their rebuild. We'll obviously be closely watching the outcome of the NHL draft lottery in early May. That's hopefully the Canucks are going to have a killer young player added to that forward mix. And then we'll see what happens with Elias Pettersson and Brock Besser and Jake DeBrusk and, some of the veterans that they were unable to move ahead of the deadline. Does demand for those players shift once teams see what the numbers look like in free agency and assess their options in the offseason? A lot of those moves are more off-season moves than trade deadline moves, classically speaking, given the flexibility that teams generally have in the offseason. And I expect the Canucks to be relatively motivated to continue clearing the decks here.
Drance in the dark, never, always the light of our lives. Thank you, Tommy. What an appearance. I felt like I just went to a lecture at university.
Yeah, thanks for letting me nerd out.
Exhausted. Yeah.
Thanks for letting me nerd out, boys. I appreciate it.
I'll do my homework. Thank you, brother.
Cheers. Bye.
Thomas Drance, The Athletic. There you go. Ask the Insider. Asking the YouTube chat. I know we had some technical difficulties earlier. Are we back?
Yeah, we are back. And this question comes from Desert Lab 22, who says, if there is a cap and a floor and players get 50% of revenue, what happens when teams don't spend 50% of league revenue? I think he means what happens when they don't spend 50%. If I'm getting Desert Lab's question correct and what he's getting at, he or she is getting at in the question, essentially, because league revenue may come in and the salary cap is structured in a way that players are receiving less than 50% of the pie, well, what's going to happen this year is players at the end of this season are going to be topped up. I think the trend was towards 3.5% of their pay. So guys that make major, anyone's getting an additional 3.5%. But if a player is making $15 million or whatever it is, they're now getting another nice chunk on top of it. So they're going to be topped up. So no matter what, at the end of the season, when all the money is thrown into a big pot, they divide it 50-50. Owners get 50, players get 50. And if the cap didn't equate to 50%, then players will get topped up in the end. The last number of years in the pandemic world, the players were taking more than their share. And so that's the reason for escrow so that owners then got to their 50% share of the pot, if that makes sense.
Right. And hence we've had some pretty good labor peace going on in the NHL these days. So yesterday, Frank, I see this dirty goal on the KHL feed. I just quote tweet, pardon me, and it ended up getting 2.4 million views with 44,000 likes. Just my little quote tweet. This goal captured everyone's attention. And I thought maybe last night with AJ Malesko, we would try to, because as we thought about it, I don't know if I could physically do it. So this is last night, ESPN. I must say, I was happy with my little pronation and supination and was able to shelf that piece of paper. Obviously easier than a puck, but in my Timu
also
Solani
easier standing
Vans.
there and not going in on skates, where the hardest thing would be to make sure that you're not falling backwards on your edges as you're doing it. That's the true amazing part of the strength. But I got to say, like, you went top Ched here, and I'm peeping the Anaheim Ducks Victory Plus Vans here.
Yeah. Gave me a little blister. I hadn't broke them in properly, but yeah, they're the Timu Solani Duck Vans. Very nice kicks. And Bucci's got hands. See, I have hands.
Pretty impressed.
Not a lot of legs, but we always had mitts. All right. Still double digit in the speculate to accumulate portion of the show. Let's get back on the W, Frank. I want a cushion. Give me some cushion tonight.
Yeah, always looking for some cushion. Tonight I'm going Wild on the puck line in Chicago. Look, their general manager, Bill Guerin, was very vocal the last couple of days about how the Wild's recent run of losses against non-playoff teams is not acceptable. That was the quote. Well, they've got another non-playoff team tonight. They're on the road. They're looking to get right. Hard to find value on the Wild. Obviously, a big money line favorite. So looking for Wild on the puck line, -1.5, +135. So little juice there, little action that would, with a win, get us north of 12 units. So looking to get back in the win column.
Yeah, Minnesota is locked in with a first-round matchup with Dallas, it appears now. It got a little crazy, although just think, if Dallas would have won last night, they would have been just 2 points behind Colorado, as Colorado ended up losing later. But right now it looks like it. But yeah, Billy Guerin not happy at all with those two stinkers against a couple of bad teams. And now they're playing the team third from the bottom, Chicago, and they're in a good position to finish there. So they're going to get another stud in the draft. Then we'll see what Kyle Davison decides to do this summer. So it's going to be, but yeah, I think that's a good play there after Billy's comments. They're going to come out and they play them again Thursday. I'm flying to Minnesota tomorrow. They have a home and home. I got the Wild and Hawks on Thursday, 6:30 local. That's good for post game, Frank. 6:30 local game.
Good for a Guinness.
And like 49 degrees too in St. Paul on Thursday. A little warming trend after this blizzard and cold spell. So it's all coming up top shelf, Bucci. All right, the last word. We're seeing the Andrei Kopitar tradition as he announced his retirement. That gives him a chance when he goes into a ring for the final time. And whenever he goes to an Eastern Conference rink, being a Western Conference team, it's always the last time. You play once over there. And last night it was time for New York. And this is one of those situations. Sometimes he sees a former teammate. And sometimes, Frank, he sees a former Stanley Cup teammate.
Yeah, this was special.
Not
to
many
see
left.
The connection between these two guys. Not many left. Both of them knocking on the door of 40. Jonathan Quick already there. I mean, to see these guys still going at it, two future first ballot Hall of Famers, and the connection that they share and will share forever, 2012 and 2014 Stanley Cups. Just love to see stuff like this. So the respect that everyone has for Andrei Kopitar around the league, you see teams lining up, handshakes, some impressive milestones that he's hit so far this season. He's been a great ambassador, and to see him connect again with Jonathan Quick, likely for the last time for both of these guys, as I kind of view it as both of these guys saying goodbye to the game as a whole, and it's treated them really well.
Interesting. And who knows, maybe they'll go in the Hall of Fame together as well. 38 years old is Andrei Kopitar, so he's getting out before 40, getting out before 39. He'll turn 39 this summer, August the 24th, 1987 for Andrei, as his goodbye to the game continues, and we'll see if it includes a postseason game. Certainly he and his team are trying to do that. And they got a little closer last night. 2 points, going to go right down to the final wire for Kopitar, the Kings, and that Western Conference. Again, a big night in the Western Conference tonight. Pacific Division, wild card. Just about all of them are in action. So some good late night viewing for you tonight to check it out on the East Coast. All right, Frank. Any final words, Frank?
No, that's it. That's all I got. Emptied the tank.
Empty the tank again. That's what we do around here. All right. I'll be traveling tomorrow to St. Paul, Minnesota. But I'll see you Thursday game day
I'll see you then.
from the St. Paul Hotel, one of my favorites. Good restaurant, good bourbon selection, good 200 location. Yards to the rink. You can walk underground if you need to get to the rink. It's all there. All right, that's Frank Saravalli, the Hockey Insider. Thanks so much for watching on X, on YouTube, on Victory Plus, and we'll see you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, right here.